Good morning all. Location, location, location. Now, time and again I see these people talk about light exposure at night, and I talk about light exposure at night all the time, or light exposure in general, so why am I sat outside in the sunlight where there's not a cloud in the sky, the lux value's got to be somewhere up towards 100,000 lux. Indoors probably under 1,000 lux, so it's 100 times brighter than it is outside than it is indoors. And all these things are important in maintaining various aspects of health. And when I started with location, 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 there was a reason I started with that, because it's important that you understand location of light has a big effect on what particular neurons or what particular centers get activated and either phase accelerate or phase delay your circadian rhythm. By that I mean they either accelerate your circadian rhythm or they delay your circadian rhythm, so you think it's still daytime when actually it's nighttime. And I've talked about it before with regards to the location of your evening time lights. And as the days get shorter again and people start to put on lighting, we have more screens on again, and the light becomes more artificial than natural. So location comes into play. And what I wanted to say today is just do a little video on understanding that the bottom half of your retina, or the bottom section of your retina, has a lot of sensitive cells that activate specific pathways in the brain. And why are they at the bottom half, and why is that important? Right, so if you think about it, when you're walking around on any given day, the bottom half of your retina is subjected to the sunlight, and so that makes sense that you would have a higher proportion of these particular cells in the bottom part of your retina, because they are the ones that measure that it's daytime out, and that we want those signals to be sent into the brain to keep the body's circadian rhythm on point, and let your body know that it's daytime and we need to be awake, alert and productive. So those same pathways are activated at night if you have overhead lights, if you have lights in the roof, if you have fluorescent lights in the roof or LED lights in the roof. And that's why I say to you, when it comes to evening, get your lighting as low as possible, as physically low as possible, i.e. on a table, or even better on the floor, because then you take away the parts of the retina are not subjected to that same light. If you have them in the roof, it's effectively like telling those parts of the retina that the sunlight is still out and therefore it's daytime and there's no need to get ready for bed. If you then put those lights down, turn those lights off and put lights on the floor, then all of a sudden those same areas of the retina are not getting the same activation signals that they were with overhead lights. The other thing you can do, as I've said before, is turn on red lights or candlelight. Those two lights don't activate that same pathway and therefore don't send the same signals. So good red lights, I'm talking about deep red lights, not these red lights that are just painted red because they have blue and greens and other colours in them. Good red lights, I can show you an example at some other time if anybody wants to know, because I've got both in my house. And so lower the physically lower the level of the lights, i.e. put them on the floor if possible, or get red lights, and they will significantly change the amount of activation that those cells in the retina get, because A, they're not getting activated because the light isn't above them, and B, red doesn't activate those particular photoreceptors. So they are two things that, as we go and the days get shorter and we put artificial lights back on again. Two things that can positively impact your sleep pattern and your circadian rhythm in general, because what you need to understand is, as we go throughout the day, the longer we've been up, the more sensitive those light sensing cells, light sensing neurons become. And that's why watching TV at night or having bright lights on at night can actually phase delay our circadian rhythm, i.e. make it harder to fall asleep. And what they found now is, by doing these things and watching these TVs and having these bright lights on at night, specifically between the hours of, say, 11 and 4, what they found is that this activates a whole neural network pathway that leads to a place called the disappointment nucleus. I'll say that again. If you have lights on after a certain time and it's bright, specifically between 11 and 4, 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., this activates a whole neural network that ends up in the disappointment nucleus. Now, if something is called a disappointment nucleus, you've got to understand the negative around that. And part of that is because it helps inhibit dopamine release, and dopamine is one of those like feel-good hormones. So if you are consistently having light exposure between the hours of 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., then you are consistently activating this depressor of dopamine, and therefore you are much more likely to get bouts of anxiety, depression, etc., 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 stress, which then leads on to difficulty sleeping anyway. So it's like a very, very negative loop. And so there you go. So if you are someone that suffers from problems with sleep, but also suffers from anxiety and stress and depression and stuff like that, it's crucial that you have almost like none to very, 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 very small amounts of light. And if you have to have those lights on at that time, then have them as low as possible, and if even better, if you can just have red, because they don't activate those same pathways. Because we don't want to keep activating the disappointment nucleus, do we? So they are some simple and effective tips to help your circadian rhythm, and as far as change the location of your lighting to as close to the floor as possible to stop that activation of that neural pathway that suggests it's daytime, and also, where possible, have effectively live in a cave after 11 o'clock. Any artificial light after 11 o'clock has the ability to activate these neural networks that activate the disappointment center, and the less we can activate the disappointment center, the better it is for our mood stability, but also the ability to lay down new memories, lay down new learning patterns, etc., etc. These are all affected by that activation of that pathway. So yes, some simple tips on how to sleep better, and how to wake up feeling refreshed, and potentially how to elevate your mood. Have a great day. Stay healthy.